listening to The Doctor's Corner with Dr. Kline and Janelle Elgaway.
Good evening and welcome to The Doctor's Corner with Dr. Kline. I'm your host, Janelle Elgaway. If you have a question or comment for Dr. Kline, please call in at 415-915-2291. Please limit your call to one question in order for us to get to everyone. And if you have more than one question, please feel free to call back. You can also chat live with the audience on KAW's YouTube channel, Conspiracies Against Wellness live stream. And don't forget, tomorrow, guest Dr. Michael Shatman will join Call Nation at 8/7 Central to discuss health insurance and current major health issues and policies within the United States and internationally. Dr. Shatman is also really looking forward to your questions, so make sure you call in. And now for tonight's show, The Doctor's Corner. Welcome, Dr. Kline. How are you this evening?
I'm just dandy.
So sorry about those technical difficulties. That happens.
I remember those when I was a boy. You know, the old screen on the TV would go off. There would be some funny noises. Stand by, technical difficulties. Well, you know, you're entitled.
It seems like the more stuff we have, the harder it is. So it seems to happen a lot. Well, thank you for being patient, everyone out there. So tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about some articles that came up recently. And I just want to know what you think. What is an opiophobe?
An opiophobe is a person afraid of opiates, and we like to substitute the word pain medicine for opiates and opioids. Opioid actually is a new term, and Congress had to pass a law to add it to the Controlled Substance Act that Richard Nixon started in 1970. So it's not a new word. And it unfortunately connotates things that I think are unfair. Best word is pain medicine. So,
Any other ones that's unfair? Just pain medicine.
Well, the narcotics is actually the oldest word, and it's the best word. Narcosis means to sleep. These are drugs that make you sleepy. And narcotic covers all the drugs: fentanyl, heroin. Every single drug falls into the group narcotic. So when the CDC has to write these tables and things, they always start tripping over themselves. Well, it's opiates plus fentanyl, because fentanyl's not truly an opiate. And then there's methadone. That's really not that, you know, and pretty soon you can't understand what they're saying, which, I don't know, lately I've been thinking they do on purpose, but we won't go there.
Okay. Well, we already have a call. Would you mind taking a call,
Sure.
Ms. Earlion? Okay. Caller from area code 602. What's your name and where are you from?
Hi. Oh, hi. This is Shirley from Phoenix.
Hi, Shirley. What's your question?
Hi, Dr. Kline. I'm very pleased to meet you, and I'm one of your followers on Twitter.
Oh.
Okay. So, I have a really peculiar reaction to opiates, and I've talked to all my doctors, and including my pain management doctor, and no one can seem to give me an answer. When I take any kind of opiates and also medical marijuana, I actually don't feel better. I actually feel worse. In other words, it increases my pain before it gets better. Even when I've been to the ER for breakthrough pain, and they've given me morphine by IV, it makes my pain worse for a few minutes before it gets better. You know why this is?
Well, this is what they talk about with hyperalgesia, which means you have hyper pain. I don't think it's that. I think it's just individual reactions to medicine. When we did a poll, about 8% of people were reporting that they got worse with their pain medicine. So it's what we call a paradoxical response. The only thing is, because each drug has an individual pattern of side effects. For example, I gave a lady some methadone. She broke out in hives. Next day, we just gave her some oxycodone. She was fine. You know, so I would, if you've got a cooperative group of doctors, I would just try other medicines. Just kind of go down the list. If your pain is important and needs to be relieved, I mean, these are the medicines, they're the only ones that work, so I think it's worth it to try different ones. So you just keep a list of the ones that have failed, and maybe after you've tried 5 or 6, you could give up and, investigate some of the alternatives.
So the medical marijuana, it does the same thing. Actually, I felt worse for an hour. Same thing as the opioids.
That's strange. I don't have an answer. You got stumped.
Okay, I got everyone stumped. So I think oxycodone probably does work the best for me out of everything so far.
Yeah, just keep trying, and you can ask the doctor for like a 1-week prescription because you're going to know right away. And then say, you mind if we just kind of go through the usual and customary and give it a try?
Okay. All righty. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for calling in.
Oh, yeah.
So, recently there were several articles stating that opioids are not better at reducing pain to improve function for chronic pain. Is this true in your opinion?
No, it's not. And when I read these, I was livid because that's not what the study was. The study was taking people out of doctors' offices. They called up doctor offices around town, and they said, do you have anybody with back pain or knee pain or hip pain that are not already on pain medicine? So what's that sound like? Sounds like a bunch of people don't have very serious disease. So then they bring them in and they give them drugstore medicine, and then they randomize it, they claimed, but they didn't blind it. So I'll explain that in a minute. So they had 2 groups. This is only 240 people. This is a very, very small medical study. Most studies that we read as doctors that have this small sample, we just don't believe. I mean, a change of like 3 or 4 patients, and all of a sudden your results are wacky. So anyway, they did this for a whole year. So they took these patients that were mild, and they gave them opiates, pain medicine for a whole year, and lo and behold, it didn't work. Well, they kind of knew it wasn't going to work. Then they gave them low-dose oxycodone, equivalent to 5 milligrams a dose. 5 milligrams of oxycodone is what you give a 9-year-old, with a broken leg. So what they did is they set up the study so it would give them the results that they wanted. And then they ballyhooted. It got picked up with things like patients with moderate to severe back pain despite it didn't work. Here's another one. Headline, finally proof, opioids are no better than other medications for some chronic pain, they add at the end. In Canada, it came up with prescription opioids no better than over-the-counter drugs for chronic pain. Well, let me tell you, they didn't have anybody in the study with chronic pain that I've seen on my Twitter stream or seen in my practice. So this is what I would call a sham. I hate to say it, it's a sham study, and it was done purposely to announce to the world that opiates don't work, and lo and behold, it was effective.
Well, and there was also an article published in JAMA, a JAMA study by Dr. Aaron Krebs recently, that Tylenol works just as well as opioids for osteoarthritis of the knee and hip. Can you go into this a little bit, and what are your thoughts on this?
Well, that's actually the study I'm talking about. So you hit it. You hit the nail right on the head.
Okay.
And let me just fumble around with my stuff here. Here's the article. It's 50 pages. There's never been an article I've ever read in any major journal that was 50 pages. What they've done, in my humble estimation, they convinced the Journal of the American Medical Association that this was a landmark, study, one of the most important studies ever done, and it wasn't. It was 240 people. It was not blinded, which means, you give somebody a little white pill and they know they're getting an opiate. And that's very important because people now think taking opiates is going to cause them problems, so that I could see them saying, no, my pain's fine. I don't need any more of that. And then they didn't give them very much. The conclusion was, and this is right from the JAMA paper, treatment with opioids was not superior to treatment with non-opioid medications for improving pain relief related function over 12 months, period. That's a dishonest, false statement. The second sentence, results do not support initiation of opioids for moderately to severe back, knee, and hip pain. So they explain it, but that's the way it works in medicine. You know, you don't start off saying, new cure for cancer, and then in the second line, improvements in toenail cancer. And that's what they did. And I'm sorry, it is unethical to produce a study like that and claim that opiates don't work, because they do work. So I asked my Twitter pile, which is now 17,000 people, what they thought. Do they agree that opiates are just as good as Tylenol and drugstore medicine? And 4% agreed. So I don't know why these people just don't go out and ask people. Well, I know why, because they're getting federal money. You know, if you get federal money to do a study, guess what? You're not going to go at the end of the study and say, you know, these opiates just worked fine and nobody got addicted. And as a matter of fact, in a year of treating people with opiates, nobody in this study got addicted, which they didn't mention, but I'm sure they would have mentioned it had it happened.
Have you ever seen anything like this before? Where they just
never. Go ahead.
No, just where they blatantly lied. I mean,
well, there are medical studies published that are basically, when you take a close look at them, kind of set up, jury rigged to give them the result. A lot of drug studies that I read are like that. You know, they publish a lot of them in the New England Journal of Medicine, our most prestigious journal. And over the past several years, they've just turned over to publishing, you know, a pharmaceutical company papers. And you can just thumb through them real quick and find the problem. Usually it's in the design of the study. In other words, the design of the study is what's the problem. The internal part is fine. They didn't get better because the study was not done properly. If you had rounded up patients who were in terrible pain and were being refused treatment, that would have been great, you know. But they eliminated all the severe cases who were taking opiates. So,
how so? Like, so if you, how did they get these people anyway? I mean, where were they getting them from?
Well, they called around to doctors' offices. This was done in Minneapolis, sponsored by the VA, and Dr. Krebs is from the University of Minnesota, where they just called up doctors. I could just picture getting a call. You know, have you got anybody with hip pain or knee pain or a little back pain that's not already on pain medicine? Well, yeah, I got a few people. They were doing okay on Tylenol, and we know they were doing okay on Tylenol because half of the people in the study were treated with just Tylenol and Motrin, and they did fine. Everybody improved on both groups, the opiate group and the Tylenol group. So we know they were Tylenol sensitive or Motrin sensitive because they got better after the 12 months of, you know, taking some store-bought medicine.
Do you know if these people were like intractable pain, or was it just chronic pain? What kind of?
Okay, they were definitely not in intractable pain. They used, if everybody is familiar with the 10-point scale, you know, 10 being horrible and 0 being nothing, their average pain score was a 5. Now, in talking to people on my Twitter feed, a lot of chronic pain, if they're having a day with 5, hey, they're going down to the market, you know, and having a good time. So their pain scores were low. So you got low pain scores, you got people that are not sick, and then you got conclusions that opiates don't work. And I'm sorry, this study needs to be retracted. At least the conclusion needs to be retracted and refined to when opiates are added to Tylenol and Motrin, there's no improvement in mildly ill people. And she used the word in here, moderate to severe pain. That's not what a 5 is. And anybody who ranks their own pain on a scale of 10 knows very well that 5 is not a serious pain score. So
what does JAMA mean anyway? I mean, like, what does it mean to be published in that and to have something published in there?
yeah, that's a big deal. Our major journals are the Journal of the American Medical Association and the New England Journal of Medicine, and a few others like the Annals of Internal Medicine, Lancet out of London. So these are the biggest, the British Medical Journal, the Canadian Medical Journal. Those are all kind of the biggies. So this is a biggie journal, and by publishing a 50-page paper, and even in the where is it? It's even in the Journal of the American Medical Association flyer that came out. It says that opiates are no better than other drugs at reducing pain, interfering with daily activities. Researchers point out in JAMA March 6th. Say anything. This is the JAMA paper. Doesn't say anything about this was mild back pain. I can assure you that if they had serious back pain, they would have already been on pain medicines. So the study was also done by an opiophobe. Opiophobes are coming to the head as people who are afraid of opiates.
Interesting. We're going to take a quick call from area code 317. Okay. What's your name and where are you from?
Good evening. This is Stacy from Indiana.
Hi, Stacy.
Hi. I really have two questions for you, Dr. Kline. After 14 years of chronic pancreatitis, calcification, and necrotizing on the organ, my pain is constant.
Yeah, I can imagine.
My long-acting pain medicine was cut in half, my short-acting by 2/3. Now my blood pressure is out of control on blood pressure medication. I have heart palpitations. My body shakes and sweats when the pain gets real intense. I don't go to the ER because I don't want to be treated like I'm a drug seeker.
Yep.
At what point do we get concerned about all of this spin-off stuff happening, and at what point is it dangerous not to go to the ER?
Well, you go to the ER for a particular reason. If it's to relieve pain, you're not going to get anywhere. If you think your pancreas is obstructed, and you're starting to vomit and stuff, then you need to go. But this is just another horrible example. Palliative care is treating somebody who has a disease that has no treatment for the disease itself. So what do? What have doctors always done? What have caretakers always done back to Mesopotamia 3,500 years ago? They get the juice of the poppy plant and give it to people because it relieves your pain. So if you can't treat the disease, you treat the symptoms. And the symptoms in this case are severe pain. Sometimes the symptoms are intractable vomiting. Then you treat that. So you've been home.
Right.
And, the only thing I can say is that you need to contact your state representative and your federal representatives. Representatives are a little better than senators because the senators have to cover the whole state. And you need to let them know that the CDC passed regulations that they claimed were voluntary, not based on fact. And they admitted that in the CDC regulations, which you can find yourself on the internet. You just go CDC 3/15/16, February, March 15th, and you'll get them. And then you can plow through them and read them. I mean, anybody can read them. It's horrible. It's 40, 50 pages single-spaced. But if you go through them, you'll find where it says, we do not feel this has scientific merit. So it's based on consensus. They've got some euphemism for opinion. It's conceptual consensus or something. Obviously, they're trying to obfuscate the fact there was a bunch of people sitting around raising their hands, and they worked in secret. And you know what? Congress got really upset and said, "What are you people doing, working in secret on these new quote regulations?" And so Congress sent them a letter and asked them what they were up to. And you can actually read that letter. All you got to do.
I actually have that letter.
Okay. Well, for everybody else in the audience, all you got to do is Google the following: Congress, 12/18/15, December 18th, 1915, Frieden, Frieden, who was the director of the CDC at the time, and the Washington Legal Foundation, which is a big, huge nonprofit. You can find that letter at Washington Legal Foundation, WLF, November 17th, 2015. Wrong one. Anyway, I'll look it up in a minute. Both of these outfits were very concerned that something was going on at the CDC. They were writing regulations for opiates. What are they doing that for? The CDC is not federally mandated to do anything concerning prescription drugs, only the FDA. So, who were these people back in the back room meeting in secret, raising their hands and saying, well, let's make up a 90 milligram cutoff, which, by the way, is made up. There's no question about it because I've read the CDC regulations word for word. And guess who one of the people were on the secret committee? Dr. Krebs, who wrote this article in JAMA. She was a member of the group. I don't know what she did behind scenes. I don't know if she was, culpable in all this. But I watched her on a YouTube conference, and the first thing she did is she stood up and gave a disastrous case history. Somebody who was taking too many opioids. So from my viewpoint as a physician, it's important to me to decide whether or not something is tainted. Because why do they publish these papers? They publish them so people like me will change our way of doing things. So when I read an article in the New England Journal about a new drug, I have to decide whether or not I'm going to actually prescribe this new drug based on the study. That's how we do things. So, physicians reading this, if they don't spend as much time as I did going through it, they're going to go, oh, my God, opiate pain medicines, they don't work. Might as well not do it. I
think that's going to be a big problem for future physicians that are being trained right now.
Yeah, good point. I talked to a fellow who they got a new resident on in his 5-member group, and the guy won't prescribe opiates at all. How horrible is that? We're the only country in the world that is so afraid of opiate pain medicine, we're trying to take it away from people.
And that was kind of my point on one of...
Yeah, go ahead.
On part of my question, I run a support group for pancreatitis patients. I have for several years. And I had a gal call me bawling her eyes out. She had just had half of her pancreas removed to get to a tumor, and surgeons did not believe in opiates. And it took till the next morning to get her anything for pain after surgery. So when is somebody culpable for this?
I think they're culpable immediately. There's you can file a complaint with the Board of Registration in Medicine. You can go online. You just Google Board of Registration in Medicine or Medical Board. It'll take you to that particular state's board. There's a little button on there, complaints, and you file a complaint. This is not the way medicine is practiced. After a surgeon cuts you up into pieces and they're not going to give you any pain medicine, what's going on? I mean, are physicians really having a hard time? Yeah, they're having a hard time with this concept of pain. To me, it's just unbelievable. Now, I'm a physician, too, so, I know that a lot of it is hospital policy, and everybody's afraid of the DEA, and for good reason, because, they're out of control, according to one federal agent I talked to on a QT, who's not in the DEA, and he said, these people are out of control. If they operated like the FBI, that's properly, using proper procedures, this wouldn't be going on. A physician like me, I spent 4 years in medical school, 3 years training, and another 3 to 5 years getting started in my practice, borrowing money, blah, blah, blah. And to have your entire career suspended with a DEA raid for no reason or improper reasons is really terrifying. So they have terrified every doctor and every dentist and every PA and nurse practitioner in this country because we don't know why they're going to suddenly come in and raid us. They always show up at 9 in the morning when your practice is full of people. Multiple vehicles, never a single agent, armed, black jackets. They always bring the police. So there's about 10 cars outside. The news reports Dr. So-and-so's office raided by the federal government. What do you suppose happens to the physician's reputation? So,
right.
But still, doctors need to, I remember reading a story about John L. Lewis organizing the coal miners back in the 30s. And the coal owners got out there with deer rifles and started killing them. So doctors need to buck up and get together and say, look, we're going to hire lawyers and we're going to go to Congress and we're not going to let this stand. Reminds me of old George Bush Sr. We're not going to let this stand. There is a point.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kline.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thanks, Stacy.
Bye-bye.
I wanted to ask you something because I've been hearing things lately that. What do you say to doctors and people thinking that in the United States, chronic pain patients just believe that they shouldn't have any pain at all, and that we are spoiled, basically. The United States is spoiled with the medications and stuff like that, and that other countries don't get this type of treatment, and they're not like this. What do you think about that?
Well, I kind of said on one of my tweets once, you need to jump over the doctor's desk and dislocate their shoulder and say, you want some Tylenol? Right. I just think it's cruel, and I think it's inexcusable. I'm sorry. I've always been loyal to my profession. We're a band of thieves, as my grandfather said when I wanted to go into medical school. I'm sorry. There's just no excuse. There's no excuse. Do people really have a hard time understanding what pain is? I mean, what's going on here? I think physicians need to sit down and look at themselves in the mirror in the morning when they get up and go, what am I doing? If I'm not relieving people's pain, then maybe I should just go do something else. In any surgeon, I tell people, you ask the surgeon ahead of time what you're going to get after the surgery, and if they say nothing, you say, see you, doc. When your ethics return, I'll come back and sign up for the surgery.
Right. Well, and there's people they're not wanting to get surgeries now. I'm hearing they're turning away surgeries and treatments and stuff like that. I mean, what does that mean for patients if they're doing that?
Well, they're not getting medical care. You see, the whole point of this is by denying pain care, people are not getting medical care because they're being kicked out of practices and stuff. So what if you have a breast lump or, you have a pneumonia? You're not going to get treated. Because every time you come in, it's like wearing a sign around you that says A on it, A for addiction.
Right. Well, and isn't that medical malpractice?
It is malpractice, and nobody's listening right now, but that's why I think it's important people file complaints with the medical board, even though they're not going to do anything about it. They're going to get enough of them to go, wait a minute. And by the way, there is an organization for all the medical boards called the Federation of State Medical Boards. It's sort of their governing body, so to speak, even though it's voluntary, that all the boards listen to. They make policies for all the boards. And the board ruled that they did not think tapering of medicine was ethical. So there you go. I mean, any board of medicine that is supporting tapering of medicine is basically violating the principles of their Federation of State Medical Boards. So it's just inexcusable. I really think people need to get out with signs. I know people are afraid because you're going to be identified as a person taking opiates and then somebody's going to break into your house. But, even small protests get on the news. I mean, even 6 people in front of a hospital, unfair government interference with doctor-patient relationship, federal drug police hounding doctors, CDC regulations that are not based on fact, and these little protests always get in our newspaper no matter what people are protesting about. The other day it was hog farms, and there they were in the newspaper.
I just want to remind our audience, if you want to call with a question for Dr. Kline, you can at 415-915-2291. So I know he wants to answer your questions. Let me ask you, are there any real studies or any long-term studies out there that prove Tylenol works better or just as well as opiates for chronic pain?
No.
Okay.
There have been a couple studies done, like I know Josh Bloom, who does a lot of writing, reviewed a study that said for headaches, opiates didn't work. Well, we don't treat headaches with opiates,
Right.
So,
well,
that was one study, but there is no other study. No, there are no studies to show this. This is all just a wildfire of ignorance.
And the majority of doctors, they don't even believe that Tylenol works for this kind of thing. Like, I wouldn't want to wake up.
They really don't. They're just convincing themselves so they won't get into trouble. And all the researchers who are receiving federal money, you don't think they're going to say, "Hey, wait a minute, these opiates are fine," and hardly anybody gets addicted. And by the way, there are no studies, and I've asked experts to show that anybody who's already on long-term pain medicine will become addicted, no matter how much you take, no matter what you take, and no matter how long you take. As a matter of fact, the FDA already ruled that all of this science was bunk. And then it all got carried over to the CDC through a Trojan horse. A story for another time.
Well, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because I'm allergic to Tylenol, and this is a weird thing. I wasn't always, but I used to be on oxycodone, and it was a 5/250 or something like that, where part of it is Tylenol and part of it is a pain medication. And one day I woke up, I took it, and then the next day I woke up and I took it, and I was suddenly allergic to it. And my throat closed up and I had hives. Is that a normal thing for people that they can? Okay.
Yeah, that can happen with any drug. You can take it for a while, then all of a sudden you become allergic to it. And that's one of those rare side effects, and then you just have to avoid the drug.
Well, that's the second part that I wanted to ask you about, because I have been told that I am drug seeking now if I tell anybody that I'm allergic to Tylenol.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, this kind of goes back to I've actually been studying the Salem witch trials to try to understand how you spread fear without evidence. This is belief without evidence. And it's interesting because it wasn't just Salem. It was multiple towns in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. These were small towns, 50 people. They were hanging their neighbors.
Yeah.
Mostly older, and not teenagers like everybody thinks. These were mostly older people and one dog. They hung 20 of their neighbors over a period of 14 months before it stopped. And one of the pastors wrote a letter and said, "Are we going to hang 10 people to find one witch?" And lo and behold, there are 10 pain patients for every person with addiction disease.
That's interesting.
Are we going to treat 10 people as addicts, as addicted people, as we look for the one person who has addiction disease? And if we're hunting them down, then maybe we ought to switch them back to the medical model like they have in Canada, where in Canada, if you have a person you think has addiction disease, you can start treating them in the office. In the United States, if I started treating a person with addiction disease, I would be arrested by the DEA, whether or not I knew they were actually having addiction disease. Even if I didn't.
Well, why is that?
Because Americans are afraid of opiates. They're afraid, going back to the days of the reefer madness, and we had a drug czar for 32 years that did nothing but spread lies about how black folks were taking white women off, and Chinese were taking white women off, and Mexicans were mixing races, and all these lies were spread around by this drug czar. His name was Anslinger, 32 years, and he spread enough rumors to scare everybody to death. So it's in our fabric now. We are scared to death of opiates. We're not so scared of the other more dangerous drugs, like amphetamines, much more dangerous, cocaine, much more dangerous, marijuana, less dangerous, It's, you know, actually, opiates are pretty safe. People do not commit serious crime with opiates. They certainly do with alcohol. So we're afraid of opiates. We're not afraid of alcohol. We're not afraid of cocaine anymore, although we were afraid several years ago. We're afraid of it. We're afraid that something bad's going to happen, that some nice teenager kid is going to drop dead because he was given an opiate. Therefore, based on 1 or 2 or 3 cases across the country, then we shouldn't be giving opiates to anybody because they might become addicted. And in fact, there's only a certain number of people that can become addicted because you have to have a specific gene abnormality in order to become addicted.
So if I'm in a doctor's office in the United States and they find out that I'm an addict and they can't treat me, who can treat me? What is the protocol then? Because I
have to go to a federal police approved doctor. So, like, if I wanted to give out medicines for addiction disease, I would have to apply for a special license from the federal drug police, the DEA, and then I could do that. I could treat addiction disease. And like I say, in Canada, you don't need a special license. You can just take care of addiction. Wouldn't that be wonderful? You know, people doctor shopping. You know, now we're hunting down doctor shoppers like they're, you know, atomic spies, and we're going to round them all up. What are we going to do when we round them up? We're going to jail people because they've got this disease? It's not really clear what we're going to do, but in Canada, it's a pretty good system. You can just say, come here, close the door. You know, it's obvious you have addiction disease, and let's get going on some treatment here. You know, and then you can, yeah, to me, I got to get a license.
Well, yeah, and you're talking about to prescribe certain medications like Suboxone, correct?
Yes, Suboxone and methadone, both. You have to have a license. I can prescribe methadone for pain, but I can't prescribe it for somebody who has addiction disease. I mean, this is how, when you allow a federal police department to run the show, this is what happens, and they interfere with the practice of medicine. They're also in charge of... Go ahead.
No. I was just asking, so who should run it? But I want to know what they're in charge of as well.
They're also in charge of manufacturing. Isn't that weird? So they're cutting back on manufacturing, thinking if you don't expose the general population to opiates, nobody will become addicted. That's exactly the same thinking they had during Prohibition. Take away the alcohol, and there won't be any alcoholics. Well, that didn't work too well. 14 years of crime, and the problem in the U.S., there's crime because of the refusal to use medications in a medical way, and heroin was made illegal in 1924, and we've had problems ever since. So, do the math.
Right. Is it like this in other countries? Do you know?
No. This is peculiar to the United States. Other countries have shortages of opiates for the treatment of pain. I know in Japan, which is always thrown up as an example, that we prescribe 100 times more than they do in Japan. Well, that's because in Japan there's nothing available. There's no heroin addicts because diamorphine, which is the pain medicine called heroin, is not available anywhere. But now the people in Japan are going, wait a minute, you know, we're not getting treated for our pain. What's going on here? Are we just supposed to be stoic Asians? You know, you got some kind of stereotype, you know, that, you know, and so, you know, the younger generation in Japan is saying, hey, we want to be treated. And the World Health Organization is always reporting on shortages of morphine, which is our main drug, and oxycodone in other countries. And I don't have an answer. I don't know why.
The United States, I just posted an article the other day, is having a shortage of morphine and Dilaudid in hospitals right now. I didn't know.
Yeah, well, that's the DEA controlling the manufacturing, thinking there were a bunch of senators who came down, there was 12 of them, came down and said, cut the supply. That will take care of the problem. This is so ignorant. A study done by the Congressional Research Service, which is a real important outfit that the Congress people listen to, said we've spent $600 billion controlling substance.
Wow.
They didn't say it hadn't worked because, their job is to report the news. But obviously it hasn't worked. $600 billion just in trying to control the amount of substance, thinking that's going to work. The total price tag is now $1 trillion, which is a number I really can't handle. I just don't understand how big a trillion is. But it is 1,000 billion. So.
Well, and another thing that's going on, and it was in the news this week, is Trump is saying that he wants to lower opioid prescriptions another 30%. They just made huge cuts in the last few years. So where are they going to do this? How?
Well, they need to discard their belief and add some evidence. Starting in 2010, that's been 7 years, there's been a drop in prescription drugs by 20%. So we've already done the experiment. Okay? So they were wondering, do all these prescriptions cause more overdose deaths? And so why don't we lower the prescriptions? Well, it just happened anyway. And because of all this opiophobia. And so now we have a 20% reduction. And what's happened to the overdose death rate? Oh, skyrocketing, highest ever. So you got to put 2 and 2 together, and now you have to say, if you're going to use that same line of logic, you have to say lowering prescriptions has caused more overdose deaths. And by the way, there's a critical adjective always left off overdose deaths. It's heroin overdose deaths. They claim that, 60 to 90, whatever number they have, people are dying every day, from overdose deaths. Actually, only 3 people are dying every day who are not in the addiction community.
Right.
Also, by the way, there's 60 people dying every day from choking, so as an example. So,
choking on of these horrible
food.
Things. Yeah.
Choking on food and stuff like that. So it kind of puts it in perspective. It's a pretty low number. We don't want anybody dying, but there wouldn't be as many people dying. There wouldn't be anybody dying had they not made heroin illegal and they had not started arresting doctors in 1915. The doctors were arrested, yes, for what? Treating addicts. And so they rounded up all the doctors, and the doctors said, we're not treating any more people. So guess what happened to supply and demand? That's when the heroin started in the streets, 1915. And the doctors all looked out the window and go, what's going on here? These people are, getting their morphine that was previously prescribed by doctors. Now they're getting heroin in the streets, and they're paying a lot more money for it. And that's when heroin addiction started in the streets. And these were people that needed to be treated. They had the real disease.
Really? Because that's interesting because, everybody thinks that it's addicts. So you think it was untreated pain within patients, actually?
Yeah, or either people in severe pain or people with true addiction disease where they really have no choice. It's a hard concept, but I think I mentioned last time there's a wonderful book called Free Refills, and it's written by a doctor who had addiction disease. And the doctor couldn't say no. Why not? His whole career was resting on this. You can't practice medicine if people think you've got a drug problem. So it's a real disease. It's unusual. And people always say, why can't you just stop? No, you can't stop. It's like being in a lifeboat after 3 days. You know you're going to die when you drink the salt water, and you just do it anyway. Sometimes your body just drives you to do things.
Right. I think what's interesting is addicts, from heroin at least, or opioid, well, it would be heroin, they are putting them on basically opioids now, right? With
Yep. And that bothers people, But too bad. What business is it of senators to say, well, isn't that just replacement? No, it's not replacement. You give just the right amount, and people can go to work, drive a car, stop stealing, resume their relationships, apologize to people for stealing from them and stuff to get enough money. So the whole thing ends. And when they're on opiates,
Right, but what I don't understand, though, is they are legally and not having problems getting that, and yet patients are. So what if we just, let them have their opioids that they needed, and patients, addicts and patients? Why couldn't they do that? If they did that, don't they think that maybe this would help things a little bit, or no? I can't do that.
Yes, and if you got the federal government out of the business of the practice of medicine, which they shouldn't be there because there's a federal law that prohibits the federal government from tinkering with the practice of medicine. There's a Supreme Court decision back in the 20s that said, federal government should not be involved in the practice of medicine. It's a state issue. In other words, if somebody thinks that I'm prescribing too many opiates, that's a state issue. The state board of registration comes and talks to me or subpoenas me or whatever. It's not the federal government's responsibility. How did they get into the business of regulating medicine outside of the FDA? Now, the FDA is a regulatory agency with the authority to do that, and they haven't done that. It is legal for me in the United States to prescribe any opiate pain medicine at any dose that I find appropriate, given the FDA guidelines. They're the ones in charge. No state should interfere with that. No drug police should interfere with that. If they think they have a problem, then they need to go to my board, and the board needs to look to see if I'm practicing within standard. And the FDA is the standard. There are no restrictions on the dose of opiate pain medicine because they're in a class by themselves. They have no side effects. You just treat until it works. You do it slowly. You build up the dose. One person might need 10. The other person might need 80. It's that much of a difference.
So what do you think the fallout of the CDC regulations has been like for doctors and patients?
It's been horrible. I call it the CDC 90 milligram death sentence. The fallout is just in 2 years is unbelievable. This is going to go down in history as the worst mistake made in modern medicine, where we are depriving up to 10 million people with chronic pain, with serious, and I think we need to start using terms like painful diseases. I don't think people in the general public, you say, I have pain. Oh, yeah, right, it's in your head. We need to start identifying the diseases. Say, I have rheumatoid arthritis, I have interstitial cystitis, I have CRPS, I have this painful disease, and it ruins my life. And, one thing that has made very clear to me on my Twitter feed, having all these folks with chronic disease that kind of in my virtual practice now, where I only had a few before, is that it's function people are looking for. They want to have sex. They want to be able to go to the movies. They want to go to their kids' PTA meetings. They want to be able to get out of the bed in the morning. They don't want to spend all day on the couch. This is, fearful to drive their car. These are the things that, according to our little polls that we've done, I'm going to be publishing soon on Medium. These are the things that people are really concerned about. This is what people are being deprived of by the United States government interfering with our practice of medicine. The CDC says, they're just voluntary. Baloney. These were taken as law. When the CDC speaks about Ebola, everybody listens. But they got themselves into the opiate business, really for reasons that we'll go into someday. It has to do with opiophobia. And people like Aaron Krebs and Dr. Andrew Kolodny and Jane Ballantyne and lots of this little group of people that managed to infiltrate a government agency and get them to publish something that was not based on fact and inappropriate.
Right, and that's why this is so big that they're publishing something like this. And I don't know if I'm sure you do remember, but back in November when you and I and a few others went to D.C., do you remember when we were in one of the senator's offices, and he said, the CDC is just guidelines. The doctors don't have to follow it, but all the doctors, the majority of doctors are following it, because they were saying, well, this isn't law, but I don't know if they realize that people are taking it that way. And Was he just trying to, like, brush us off, or did he really believe that?
No, I think the opiophobes or the anti-pain medicine people really believe it. I think maybe a lot of them have personal experiences that are very tragic, and they want to do something about it. So I think they're being genuine. But you know what? You can't stand on the corner and tell people the world's coming to an end without giving a solid reason. You know, the CDC claims, oh, these are just voluntary. But you know what? If you throw a cigarette butt out the window and it starts a forest fire, they come looking for you. Oh, it was just an accident. Too bad. You're culpable. And the fallout that has occurred, millions of people, largely women, you know, are given the stories like we just heard, you know. They're going to cut me off my pain medicine, you know. And I published a series of almost 30 people killing themselves because they were cut off.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Kolodny, when I asked him about that, said, oh, they were probably withdrawing. No, they weren't withdrawing. That goes away in a couple of weeks. They were suffering these terrible pain diseases like interstitial cystitis and all these rare diseases, about 30 of them, 30 rare diseases, and they're just being tortured. I'm sorry. They're being forced to give up their pain medicine. They then go into pain. They're being tortured. No different than Guantanamo, except in Guantanamo they torture them for 3 or 4 hours, then they go back to their room, and they're fine. Or pain patients are being tortured 24 hours a day, and their lives are being ruined.
So fast forward 2 to 5 years from now, what does that world look like right in the United States on this?
I think it will eventually reverse itself. There's something very important going on. The human rights people are now going to 6 different states, and they're taking kind of interviewing people that are in pain, have been pain denied, and doctors that have been chased down by the DEA. There's a UN principle. Everybody has the right to be treated for their pain. It's in the UN. You know, we're just sticking out like a sore thumb. I mean, people around the world are going, what, you're not treating pain? What's up with you people? But you know what? I talked to a guy in Ireland, and he said, I guess you're having a problem with too many prescriptions. So you see, that part is getting around. You know why we have more prescriptions? Because the DEA will not allow us to write for refills. So if I want to give somebody pain medicine, I would normally put on their refill 3 times. So I send in 1 prescription.
Right.
The DEA write out 3 prescriptions. So guess what? We have more prescriptions.
Well, and now people have to go back every week, or every 2 weeks, or 3 weeks in some states.
Yeah, or 3 weeks. So that you're going to be writing even more prescriptions. So we're not really writing more prescriptions. We're writing more pieces of paper because the DEA is in charge of rules. Like I cannot write a refill 3 times, but I can give somebody 3 prescriptions.
Right.
So that's why we prescribe more, everybody.
Well, Dr. Kline, we're going to wrap up here. Did you have any last words for this evening?
No, I think it's important that anybody who's being tortured by the federal government, let it be known. And you need to speak to congressmen, federal and state congressmen, and ask for an appointment to go in and talk to them, or at least email, so that they start getting a big pile.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on this evening. And thank you so much for joining us this evening at the Doctor's Corner with Dr. Kline and myself. And tomorrow, don't forget, 8/7 Central, Dr. Michael Shatman will join us. He'll be discussing health insurance and the current major health issues and policies within the United States and internationally, and a lot of the opioid issues, too. So please join us then. I hope you all have a great night, and thank you for coming in.
You've been listening to The Doctor's Corner with Dr. Kline and Janelle Elgoway. Copyright 2018 by EXG LLC. All rights reserved.